English translation, 301st contact. Tuesday, 24th April, 2001, 1857 hours.
Greetings, my friend.
Now you almost scared me with your sudden appearance. But a heartfelt welcome from me, and of course you shall also be greeted.
It was not my intention to frighten you.
Of course not.
Zafanat Panak will also appear briefly. He will be here in a few minutes. Why, you will find out from him. Until then, we can do our business. Are you done with what you want?
Of course. I have promised you. One moment. Here, everything is there.
How many pages is that? I always wonder at how you manage to cope with everything.
Oh, that is not so bad. When I have rest during the night hours, everything goes pretty smoothly.
But you also have the spiritual teaching, also known as the creation energy teaching, the bulletins, books, articles, and small writings. Our contact conversations are not to be forgotten either, nor are your letters, faxes, and telephone calls, as well as other work you do, in addition to the shopping trips you make at least twice a week.
Everything is half as bad because otherwise I could not make it.
As usual, you like to downplay it, and it really makes me think twice when I have to burden you with new work again, which I want to talk to you about later.
Do not worry. Firstly, it is my duty to also devote myself to your spiritual teaching concerns, and secondly, it also gives me pleasure.
But you must also be concerned about recreation, Edward.
That is me, my friend. I can recover through the joy of work. Ah, hello, Zafanat Paniak. Welcome to my den.
Do I not come untimely, since you are in the middle of a conversation? I pay you my greeting.
No, you did not come untimely. Ta also told me you were coming. What is your desire?
Are you writing down this contact conversation?
Certainly.
May I ask you not to put my request in writing?
Of course. I shall and will not write down anything that you do not wish.
Thank you. I have already presented my request to Ptah, but I would also like to get your evaluation and advice.
Of course. How do you position yourself, Ptah?
No, my friend. I do not feel passed over in my advice or the like. It is even very pleasant for me when you are also consulted.
Well then, Zafanat Paniach, please state your concern.
The matter is that...
Well, I do not know what advice Ptah gave, but for my part, I see the whole thing in such a manner that I would like to say the following about it. Ah, should this also remain unwritten?
That is my wish.
Well then this. That is what I have to say and can contribute to everything as advice.
Your words and your advice are extremely pleasing for me. Besides, they are fully in line with everything that Ptah has already told, explained and advised me. Thank you very much. Then I would like to say goodbye again. Farewell. And again many thanks, which I express to you also in the name of Florena, whereby I should still greet you from her.
Thank you, and he is gone. But he is in a devil of a hurry. But I think that is understandable.
I think so too. Then I would now also like to say goodbye.
Do you still have time for me to ask you some questions?
Certainly. Besides, I almost forgot that I still have to discuss with you the new work I brought you.
Of course. At the moment, I did not think about it either. May I ask you what is the situation with the new monitoring disc you want to reinstall, as you finally told me? Do you already have it in operation?
This is the case.
Aha, and what performance does this thing achieve?
It is aligned with our latest ultra-subatomic computer technology.
I know a lot now. What performance does this thing achieve and how big is it?
The size of the apparatus is 4 square millimeters with a total thickness of 1 millimeter. This mass also contains the entire processor apparatus, as well as the transmitter and receiver, the power generating unit, and the dynamizer.
Dynamizer? What is that?
Is the name not correct? I mean the engine.
Aha, you can also call it that. An incredibly tiny mass, this control disk. How big is the storage capacity of the tiny one?
74 exabyte.
A bohemian forest for me. Exabyte, I have never heard or read that before. How can that be expressed in numbers?
You call an exabyte 1018.
Man, that is a trillion. 74 exabytes would then be 74 trillion bytes. And that is stored on such a tiny surface. Ultra-subatomic, you say?
Certainly.
And that generally corresponds to your highest current computer technology. Man, oh man. May I ask how many operations your high-performance computers are able to perform per second? High-performance computers? Nonsense. They certainly are not, if I judge your technology by what you just explained.
The operational speed of our fastest computers is 1052 operations per second.
And all this on an ultra-subatomic basis? That is super speed. And how big is a computer like that? And how much power does it need for operation?
I told you the size of the smallest, 4 square millimeters of surface area and 1 millimeter of thickness. The required operating power is 7 watts for a computer the size of a cubic meter, such as the one in my generation flying device.
You mean in your great spacer?
Yes.
How much energy does the tiny control disk of only 4 square millimeters and only 1 millimeter thickness need?
The demand is in the nanoscale of a watt.
I admit defeat. Another question. One of you once answered a question about this by saying that active or passive euthanasia would be tantamount to murder one way or the other. In any case, so that the Hippocratic oath and sense would be grossly violated and trampled on.
That is correct. Active or passive euthanasia is and remains murder, because no human has the right to determine the life and death of another human nor their own life in such a wise that an unnatural death is consciously brought about. But if this is disregarded, then in any case a murder or suicide takes place, which corresponds to a tremendous human assumption by which creational laws are disregarded and abused.
What about when life-supporting machines are simply turned off? When bodily functions are only maintained by such apparatuses?
Even such apparatuses are unnatural, for they not only rob humans of the dignity of natural dying, but they also interfere in the process of natural dying. If there is no hope for improvement of health and the natural preservation of life, then no apparatuses may continue to keep the dying body alive senselessly.
I do not think that can be called active or passive euthanasia, and therefore not murder, can it?
That corresponds to correctness.
Good. Already at the beginning of our contacts in 1975, you explained to me that everything in the whole universe emits swinging waves and tones. So also the smallest parts, thus also quarks, positrons, neutrons, electrons, and thus also the whole level of the atoms. These tonal swinging waves, I remember your explanations, form the so-called harmonic cosmic music.
That is correct. The whole universe and everything that exists in it, in every form in the coarse and fine material realms, is classified into swinging waves and tones, which appear in certain sound sequences and produce what you call cosmic music.
So this also applies to the spiritual energies, right?
Certainly.
Question. In humans, it is the so-called retroviruses that are responsible for the AIDS epidemic. But now there are luteviruses in animals and small ruminants, such as sheep and goats, or what they are called. As with the AIDS virus, these luteviruses are also extremely highly transmissible, so that sheep and goats in particular spread infectious diseases through the virus, which manifest themselves in small ruminants, particularly as chronic pneumonia and joint inflammation. Our earthly scientists now claim that these viruses and diseases cannot spread to humans because the so-called species barrier would prevent this. Is that true? The same has already been said about the AIDS epidemic. Although it was originally transmitted from the green monkeys, an African small monkey species, to chimpanzees and humans, as well as to other animals such as cats.
The virus you mentioned can indeed mutate and spread to humans, triggering symptoms similar to those of small ruminants. However, it will still take some time until the earthly scientists will recognize this through research.
The Earth human being is always quick to condemn a human being if one has committed a mistake or an offense, etc. I teach that this is wrong, and that it is never the human being, but only his or her negative wise of thinking or acting that may be condemned, but never the human being himself or herself. This is also anchored in the spiritual teaching, also known as creation energy teaching. The human being as such may in any case only be assessed, and therefore never condemned. How would you express this?
Only the very thought of condemning a human as such instead of his or her evil thoughts and actions is reprehensible. To condemn a human being as such is unworthy, as is the bad habit, which appears in the great mass of human beings of the earth. That false thoughts, negative thoughts and negative feelings as well as wrong actions, committed mistakes and offenses or even culpable actions of a human being are always reproached to him or her in a condemnatory way, and a respective wise of treatment is created out of it. Of course, serious or most serious crimes, such as murder, terror, and other capital crimes cannot go unpunished. But every punishment of the punishable action should be appropriate, but never a death penalty or a physical or psychological mistreatment penalty should be given. Consequently, only places of fulfillment of measures may be considered, which besides the social community connection and freedom guarantee the physical and evolutionary freedom. This shall also be the case in cases of deliberate murder, terror, and other serious capital crimes, even if the fulfillment of the measure is extended for life.
So lifetime really means lifetime?
Certainly.
What do you think about how it happens here on Earth that, for example, sex offenders such as child and woman rapists and child abusers are sent out of prison or released from prison after a few years in jail or psychiatry, and after shorter or longer psychology and psychiatry treatments?
This is wrong, because our experience has proven since time immemorial that sex offenders of all kinds are repeatedly overwhelmed by their drives, which can only be prevented by certain brain operations. So it is absolutely irresponsible to set sex offenders on their own again, because sooner or later they will fall for their degenerated instincts again and again. Their change, attributed to them by psychiatrists, psychologists, and other responsible persons, is usually nothing more than a conscious spectacle of the sex offenders who deceive those responsible, but who are not clever enough to recognize this fact. This is usually because they see themselves more intelligent and wiser than they really are. Many an ordinary worker often understands more about psychology than the trained psychologists, who study for several years and yet do not learn anything, as is unfortunately the case on Earth with the human beings.
Man, you are stepping into a big fat trap. Psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, and the like certainly do not like to hear that. But you are right.
That is why I have chosen my words as I have spoken them. Unfortunately, many earthly psychologists and psychiatrists, as well as social workers, etc., feel bigger and more knowledgeable than they really are. Their professional knowledge is only too often extremely deficient, which is why it happens again and again that they create false certificates and let sex offenders go free again, for which they can never bear the responsibility.
You speak for me. All too often in my life, I have experienced, and still experience today, that psychologists and psychiatrists simply send mentally ill people into the desert because they cannot help them with advice or medication, and especially not with understanding. That is the true greatness of our psychologists and psychiatrists, who also describe all those, like me, with idiotic certificates and convictions as mad, sick, and stupid, who doubt and deny their confused assertions and statements.
This is well known to me.
We have recently talked about how negative thoughts and feelings, negative words and bad music, etc., affect the purity of water. I would like to ask whether religious sectarian machinations produce the same results and thus change the water negatively?
Religious sectarian machinations have the same negative qualities as evil thoughts, feelings, writings and words, disharmonic music, etc.
Belief alone is unreal and must actually call forth negative reactions in the water as well as ritual acts, etc. Or am I mistaken?
Your assumption is correct.
What about wine, other alcoholic drinks and milk, vegetables, fruit of all kinds, tropical fruits, meat and other foods as well as trees, shrubs, flowers, and other plants of all kinds? Or is an answer superfluous?
An answer is not superfluous, because in fact all the things you have mentioned are affected by it. On the other hand, you know very well that this is the case. Think only of the flower garden you used to have in your workroom. Remember especially the mimosa that always turned to you very quickly when you moved. When you went to the door, it turned around after you and stretched out its flowers and branches towards you. If you went to the other side of the room or sat at your desk, the same thing happened. And if you have sat on your seat for a long time, then all the flowering orchids have aligned themselves with you and turned their flowers toward you. But when you then suffered your severe health breakdown, and your inner harmony was destroyed by all the unpleasant circumstances and events around you, it happened that within only 6 days all the flowers withered and died, except for a few that you removed from your workroom early and gave to Cornelia.
I remember very well, my friend. And I am still very sorry today that my total collapse destroyed all the harmony of my plants and withered them all. But tell me, are you sure that this particular plant was a mimosa? I remember it as a mimosa, but for some years now Bernadette has been trying to convince me that it was a jasmine plant. But I remember this special plant as mimosa. Even today I can still see her image in front of me, and how she has always turned to me, wherever I went into my office.
You are not mistaken, and your memory is good. My daughter Simya Se once captured the phenomenon in a moving image which you may have forgotten from memory. The recording is in our archives and even astonished our spiritual leadership when they saw these recordings that we spread through our visual information devices.
Oh, I see. You are beautiful birds to me, for you have never told me anything about showing my wandering mimosa to all the people. Well, somehow I still remember Simya Se recording everything with a small apparatus and then showing me the recordings, on a small table where everything appeared as a hologram. Even I was present in this hologram and seemed lifelike before my eyes, just as if I myself had been present in the hologram. Just tiny.
You actually do remember. But now, dear friend Edward, let us turn our attention to the concerns that concern ourselves with further work for you. It would be extremely helpful if you could complete the work as quickly as possible so that I can pick it up again after mid-May.
I am sure we can arrange that. So let us get started now. What are your concerns?
As usual, they are of a purely spiritual-based nature.